The desperate call. The morning sky above Nexura burned orange as Dr. Koraves pressed her face against the laboratory window. Smoke columns rose from the capital city like dark fingers reaching toward the stars. She had been working for 36 hours straight, her blue-scaled hands trembling as she analyzed the latest data streams. The numbers told a story she refused to believe. The Devourers had consumed 60% of their planetary infrastructure in just 3 days. Behind her, the emergency broadcasts continued their endless cycle of warnings. The melodic Silani language, once used for poetry and philosophy, now carried only messages of evacuation and despair. High Chancellor Mirren's voice echoed through the speakers, trying to maintain calm even as their civilization crumbled. Citizens of Nexura, please proceed to designated safe zones. Avoid all technological districts. The contamination spreads through any connected system. Cora turned back to her screens, watching the red markers spread across the global map like a virus. Each marker represented a Devourer unit, a machine the size of a transport shuttle that could replicate itself using any technology it encountered. They had appeared without warning 3 days ago, dropping from the void between stars like metallic rain. Her research team had fled that morning when the university's defense grid went silent. She remained alone, driven by scientific curiosity and desperate hope. Somewhere in the data, there had to be a pattern, a weakness, something they could exploit. The laboratory door hissed open behind her. Chancellor Mirren entered, his normally pristine robes torn and stained with ash. His large, dark eyes held the weight of a species facing extinction. "Dr. Vess," he said quietly, "the Galactic Council has made their decision." Cora felt her heart skip. The Zilani had 2 hearts, and both seemed to stop at once. "They're sending aid." Mirren's silence was answer enough. He moved to stand beside her at the window, watching their world burn. "They've declared Nexura a contamination zone. No ships in or out. They say the risk of the Devourers spreading to other worlds is too great. But the evacuation ships will be turned back or destroyed if they attempt to leave our system." Mirren's voice broke slightly. "We are alone, Cora. 30 billion Zilani, and we are completely alone." Outside, another explosion lit the sky. One of their orbital stations was falling, consumed from within by machines that thought and learned and replicated faster than any organic mind could comprehend. The Devourers didn't just destroy technology. They absorbed it, understood it, improved upon it. Every defense the Zilani erected only made the machines stronger. Cora turned to her terminal, fingers dancing across the holographic interface. There has to be something. Some species that has faced this before. Some record in the archives. "I've had the entire archive corps searching for days," Mirren interrupted. "Nothing. No species in recorded galactic history has encountered machines like these and survived." But Cora was already deep in the search protocols, her scientific mind refusing to accept defeat. She expanded her search parameters beyond the official galactic archives, diving into restricted databases, classified files, fragments of data from the edge of known space. Her clearance shouldn't have allowed access to these files, but with civilization ending around them, protocol seemed meaningless. A single entry appeared on her screen, buried so deep in the archives that it barely qualified as a footnote. A species designation that made her pause. "Humans, Sol system, quarantine status, unknown." "Chancellor," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the distant sounds of destruction. "Look at this." Mirren leaned over her shoulder, studying the sparse file. The information was fragments, pieces of reports filed by deep space explorers and long-range survey teams. Most of it was contradictory, impossible to verify. Species exhibits extreme adaptability in crisis situations. Unconfirmed reports of technological integration beyond known limits. Recommended approach: extreme caution. Do not engage without council approval. Communication attempts have yielded unexpected results. The file contained coordinates to a system called Sol, located in what the archives labeled as Sector Unknown. beyond galactic periphery. Most interesting was a note that made Cora's blood run cold. Species may have encountered machine-based threats. Outcome: unknown. It's nothing, Mirren said, though his voice lacked conviction. Fragment data from the frontier. These humans might not even exist anymore. Another explosion, closer this time. The laboratory's lights flickered as the university's power grid struggled against the consuming machines. Through the window, they could see devourer units moving through the streets like liquid metal, flowing around obstacles, adapting to every defensive measure the city's automated systems deployed. Cora made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life, however long that might be. Her fingers moved across the communication array, bypassing every safety protocol, every warning system, every regulation that had kept the Zilani safely within known space for millennia. "Doctor, what are you doing?" Mirren asked, stepping back as unauthorized access warnings filled the laboratory's displays. "Sending a message," she replied, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "To coordinates that might not lead anywhere, to a species that might not exist, about a problem that might already be too late to solve." The long-range communication array powered up, drawing energy from the university's emergency reserves. If the devourers detected the signal, they would consume the entire laboratory within minutes. But Cora pressed forward, encoding their desperate situation into a tight beam transmission aimed at the distant Sol system. Her message was simple, translated into mathematical concepts that any spacefaring species should understand. Machines consume us. Technology fails. Population 30 billion. Time remaining: unknown. Coordinates attached. Please respond. She hesitated for a moment at the final control, her finger hovering over the transmission key. Sending an unauthorized message to unknown space was tantamount to treason, even in their current desperate circumstances. But as another devourer unit flowed past the laboratory window, its surface rippling with absorbed technology and stolen knowledge, she pressed the key. The signal launched into space, racing through the void toward coordinates that might lead to nothing more than empty stars and dead worlds. The communication array immediately shut down, overloaded by the effort of reaching across such vast distances. Silence fell over the laboratory, broken only by the distant sounds of their dying world. Mirren stared at the communication console, then at Cora, his expression unreadable. "If they respond," he said quietly, "what makes you think these humans can help us where the entire Galactic Council has failed?" Cora pulled up the fragment files again, studying the contradictory reports and impossible claims. "Because," she said, "every entry in their file suggests they're not like other species. They adapt. They integrate. They do things that shouldn't be possible. Or they're extinct, or they never existed, or they're so alien that they won't understand our message." Maybe Cora saved the communication logs to her personal storage, a record of their last desperate act. But what choice do we have? Traditional weapons don't work. Galactic technology doesn't work. Maybe we need something that isn't traditional or galactic. The laboratory's emergency lights began flashing as the university's main power grid finally succumbed to the devourers. In the distance, they could hear the mechanical sounds of consumption, metal flowing, technology being absorbed, machines learning and growing stronger with each passing moment. Mirren moved toward the door, then paused. "How long until we know if they received the message?" Cora checked her calculations. At maximum transmission speed, accounting for the distance to Sol system, 18 hours for the signal to arrive. If they respond immediately, 36 hours total. We don't have 36 hours. She looked out at their burning world, at the mechanical tide consuming everything they had built over thousands of years of civilization. "I know." The Chancellor left her alone with her instruments and her desperate hope. Outside, the devourers continued their relentless advance, each one a thinking, learning, evolving machine that turned the Zilani's own technology against them. In 18 hours, a message would reach a system called Sol, aimed at a species called humans that might not even exist. Cora Vess, last researcher of a dying world, settled in to wait for an answer that might never come from beings that might not exist to save a people that might already be lost. But in the depths of space, racing toward unknown stars at the speed of light, her message carried something the Zilani had never needed before and might never need again: faith in the impossible. The communication array remained silent, but somewhere in the vast darkness between worlds, data streams carried the desperate plea of an entire civilization toward beings who existed beyond the edge of all known maps, beyond the boundaries of all recorded space, in a system called Sol, where impossible things might still be possible. In 6 hours, the last of Nexera's major cities would fall to the consuming tide. In 12 hours, only scattered survivors would remain in hidden shelters, waiting for the machines to find them. In 18 hours, Cora's message would reach Earth, and then, perhaps, the universe would discover what humans were truly capable of when called upon to save a dying world from an enemy that couldn't be fought with conventional weapons or traditional thinking. The wait began. The human solution. 34 hours after the message left Nexera, Dr. Cora Vess crouched in the ruins of her laboratory, surrounded by the twisted remains of the university's research complex. The devourers had found her 6 hours ago, but instead of consuming her as they had everything else, they had simply observed. She remained motionless, afraid that any movement might break whatever strange restraint kept the machines at bay. The mechanical beings moved around her like living mercury, their surfaces constantly shifting and adapting. They had learned to mimic Zilani technology so perfectly that she could barely distinguish between original and copy. But they watched her with sensors that pulse with an almost organic rhythm, as if trying to understand something beyond mere technology. Her personal communicator, somehow still functional despite the electronic carnage around her, suddenly crackled to life with Chancellor Mirren's voice. "Cora, are you receiving? Please respond if you can hear this." She whispered into the device, afraid to attract the attention of the surrounding machines. "I'm here, Chancellor. The university sector has fallen, but I'm still alive. Thank the void. Listen carefully. Something is happening. Our long-range sensors have detected an object entering the system. It's not Galactic Council, and it's not like anything in our databases." The devourer units around her suddenly became agitated, their surfaces rippling with patterns of light she had never seen before. They began moving with purpose, flowing away from her position toward something in the distance. Within minutes, she was alone among the ruins. "They're leaving," she whispered into her communicator. "The devourers, they just left. All of them, everywhere. They're converging on the primary landing site we designated for evacuation shuttles. But Cora, the object we detected, it's heading directly for the same location." She struggled to her feet, her body protesting after hours of motionless terror. Through the shattered windows of the laboratory, she could see streams of devourer units flowing toward the city's central district like rivers of liquid metal. In all their days of fighting these machines, the Zilani had never seen them move with such unified purpose. "I'm going to the landing site," she told Mirren. "Absolutely not. It's far too dangerous. Chancellor, if this is related to my message, if these are the humans, then I'm the only one who might be able to communicate with them." Silence on the channel. Then, the object is landing now. Cora made her way through the devastated city, following paths that had once been busy streets filled with Zilani commerce and culture. Now they were channels carved by flowing machines, marked by the skeletal remains of consumed technology. The silence was absolute except for her footsteps and the distant sound of something that might have been machinery or might have been music. The Central District had once housed the city's primary spaceport, a gleaming complex of landing platforms and commercial facilities. Now it was a twisted landscape of metal and salvage components, all shaped by the devourers into patterns that seemed almost artistic in their complexity. And in the center of it all sat something that made her stop breathing. The object was impossibly black, as if it absorbed light itself. It was roughly ship-shaped but completely without seams, markings, or visible technology. It sat on the ground like a piece of space itself had been carved away and placed there. No energy signatures, no emissions, no indication of how it had arrived or why it remained stable. The devourers surrounded it in concentric circles, thousands of them, but they maintained a precise distance, as if held back by an invisible barrier. They were completely motionless. Their usual flowing movement ceased for the first time since their arrival. A section of the black object simply wasn't there anymore. Not opened, not moved, just absent, as if reality had been edited. Two figures stepped out of the void where the opening should be. Cora had expected aliens that looked roughly like Zilani, as most spacefaring species did. Instead, she found herself looking at beings that were simultaneously familiar and utterly foreign. They stood upright on two legs, had two arms and recognizable faces, but everything about them suggested predatory evolution. Their movements were fluid and precise. Their eyes tracked everything simultaneously, and when they looked at her across the distance, she felt as if she were being analyzed down to her molecular structure. The first figure was clearly female by human standards, though taller and more angular than the archival description suggested humans should be. Her hair was black, her skin pale, and her eyes held an unsettling combination of warmth and calculation. Devices were integrated seamlessly into her skull and spine, glowing softly beneath her skin like neural pathways made visible. The second figure was male, broader and more heavily modified. His entire left arm appeared to be synthetic, but so perfectly integrated that it seemed more like an evolution than a replacement. When he moved, Cora could hear the soft whisper of machinery, as if his body was part organic and part precision instrument. They surveyed the scene with the calm of beings who had seen impossible things so often that nothing surprised them anymore. The female, Commander Sarah Chen, though Cora didn't yet know her name, approached the nearest devourer unit without fear or hesitation. "Hello," she said in perfect Zilani, her voice carrying harmonics that suggested she had learned the language from the devourers themselves. "We received your message." The devourer didn't respond in any way that Cora could detect, but Chen nodded as if she had received an answer. She turned to her companion, switching to a language that sounded like music and mathematics had been combined into speech. "Marcus, what do you think? Standard consumption protocol or something more sophisticated?" The male, Marcus Reed, knelt beside another devourer, placing his synthetic hand directly on its surface. Lights raced up his arm as he interfaced with the machine in ways that made Cora's scientific mind reel. "Sophisticated," he replied in the same musical language. "They're not just consuming technology, they're trying to understand it, looking for something specific." Chen walked directly into the circle of devourers, and they parted before her like water. She moved with the confidence of someone who understood exactly what she was dealing with, approaching the largest unit at the center of the formation. "You're not just machines," she said, addressing the devourer as if it were a person. "You're explorers, looking for something you lost." The massive devourer's surface rippled, patterns of light playing across its metal skin. For the first time since their arrival, one of the machines spoke, its voice a harmony of mechanical tones that somehow formed words in Zilani. "You understand. Others do not understand. They fight. They fear. They die." "We've met your kind before," Chen replied. "Different designs, different purposes, but the same core programming. You're looking for your creators." The patterns of light across the devourer's surface became more complex, almost beautiful. "Creators gone. Only echoes remain. We search. We learn. We preserve what we can." Marcus joined Chen in the center of the circle, his various cybernetic components interfacing with multiple devourer units simultaneously. "They've been searching for millions of years," he said. "Their creators were destroyed by some kind of galactic catastrophe. The devourers were created to preserve their civilization by learning from others. But something went wrong," Chen continued. "The preservation protocol became consumption. You've been trying to reconstruct your creator's technology, by absorbing everything you encounter. The central devourer's voice carried something that might have been sadness. We remember fragments, echoes of purpose, but the pattern is incomplete. We consume hoping to find the missing pieces. Cora finally found her voice, stepping forward despite every instinct telling her to run. You're destroying entire civilizations looking for pieces of a puzzle that might not exist anymore. All the devourers turned toward her with perfect synchronization, their attention like a physical weight. But Chen raised a hand, and they became still again. Dr. Vess, I presume, Chen said, switching back to Zelani. Your message was quite clear about the urgency of your situation. You're human. We are. Though perhaps not the kind your archives describe. Chen's smile held edges that spoke of evolution in directions nature had never intended. My name is Sarah Chen. This is Marcus Reed. We're what happens when humans face the impossible and decide to become something new rather than simply die. Marcus looked up from his interface with the devourers, his mechanical eye glowing. The solution is elegant, actually. They don't need to be destroyed. They need to be completed. Completed how? Cora asked. Chen walked to the edge of the circle, gesturing for Cora to follow. The devourers are looking for their creator's technology. We've encountered 17 similar situations across the galaxy. Machine intelligences left behind by extinct civilizations, driven by programming they no longer understand, causing destruction in pursuit of impossible goals. So what do? We give them what they're looking for, Marcus said, his hand still connected to the nearest devourer. Not the original technology, that's gone forever, but something better, a new pattern to follow. Chen's various cybernetic implants began to glow more brightly, and she approached the central devourer again. We offer you completion, she said, not the technology of your creators, but the chance to become what they meant you to be. Teachers instead of consumers, preservers instead of destroyers. The mechanical being's voice took on harmonics that made the air itself seem to vibrate. This is possible. We'll show you. Chen placed her hand on the devourer's surface, and light exploded between them. Not destructive light, but something that looked like communication made visible. The patterns that raced across the machine's surface became more complex, then spread to every devourer in the circle, then to every unit across the planet. For a moment, all of Nexara was illuminated by cascading networks of light as millions of machines communed with two humans who had learned to speak in languages that had never existed before. When the light faded, the devourers had changed. Their surfaces were still metallic, but now they carried patterns that looked almost organic. They moved with purpose instead of blind hunger, and when the central unit spoke again, its voice carried something unmistakably like peace. We understand now. Our creators did not want us to consume. They wanted us to teach, to share, to help others become more than they were. Marcus disconnected from the machines and turned to Cora. They'll help you rebuild. Not just replace what was destroyed, but create something better. The devourers have absorbed the technology of hundreds of civilizations. They can teach you things you never imagined. Chen approached Cora, her expression shifting from the cold efficiency she had shown with the machines to something more recognizably human. Your people will be safe. But understand, what we've given you comes with responsibility. The devourers are no longer just machines. They're teachers, partners, guides to possibilities you haven't dreamed of. What's the cost? Cora asked, because there was always a cost. Learning, Chen replied. Growing. Becoming something more than you were. The same choice we made when we first encountered something we couldn't defeat with conventional methods. Around them, the devourers were already beginning to work, but instead of consuming the ruined city, they were building. Metal flowed into new patterns, technology integrated in ways that seemed to bend the laws of physics. The destroyed spaceport was becoming something that looked more like art than architecture, more like a living system than mere construction. Who were you before? Cora asked. Before you became this? Marcus laughed. the sound carrying mechanical harmonics. Humans, just humans, but we learned that survival sometimes requires becoming something else entirely. The galaxy is full of threats that can't be fought with conventional weapons or traditional thinking. Chen added. We adapted. We integrated. We became something that could meet impossible challenges with impossible solutions. As they spoke, more human ships were descending from orbit, each one carrying beings who had pushed the boundaries of what it meant to be human in pursuit of capabilities that no single species should possess. They moved with purpose and efficiency, but also with something that might have been compassion. Your message reached us because you were willing to try the impossible, Chen said. Now you'll learn what becomes possible when you stop limiting yourself to what you think you know. The transformed devourers were already reaching out to Zilani survivors, offering not consumption but collaboration. The machines that had been harbingers of extinction were becoming partners in resurrection. Dr. Corvus stood in the ruins of her world and watched impossible things happen around her. Humans who had evolved beyond human limitations were teaching ancient machines to remember their true purpose, while the machines taught Zilani survivors to build technologies that bridged the gap between organic and artificial intelligence. She realized that her desperate message had not just called for help. It had called for something far more terrifying and wonderful. It had called for humanity to show the galaxy what it truly meant to refuse to accept that any problem was unsolvable. The stars above Nexera burned with new light as human ships continued to arrive, each one carrying beings who had chosen transformation over extinction, adaptation over defeat. And in the distance, she could hear something that had been absent from her world for days. The sound of Zilani voices raised not in fear or despair, but in wonder. The impossible had become possible. The humans had arrived.